Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. This time, we're exploring cottage gardens.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, that charming look, overflowing with blooms and winding paths.
Right, like a little bit wild.
Exactly. We'll unpack the how, but also the why this style is so popular.
That's a good point. The why.
And you know what? There's actually a surprising backstory there.
Oh, really? Tell me.
I know. I was surprised too. So, while cottage gardens now feel very romantic,
Mm-hmm.
their roots are actually really practical.
What, like really, really proud?
You bet. We're talking medieval peasant gardens, even there.
Many.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So those adorable cottages you see in films,
Yeah.
they're actually based on how people grew food centuries ago.
You're kidding. So, okay, picture medieval Europe.
Okay.
Peasants had these tiny plots of land,
Yeah.
essential for survival.
Yeah.
They had to grow everything there. Food, medicinal herbs,
Right.
even materials for things like weaving and thatching.
Wow. So practical.
Super practical. No room for just pretty flowers back then.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But then how do we get from that
Yeah.
to the cottage gardens we see now?
Well, it was a slow change,
Mm-hmm.
driven by people wanting more beauty.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. As they had more time and resources,
Mm-hmm.
they started adding flowers to their gardens
Okay.
and thinking about how things looked as well as how useful they were.
So it's like this beautiful blend of function and art.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really cool evolution.
And I've always wondered about famous garden designers.
Oh, yeah.
Like Gertrude Jekyll, did they influence the cottage garden style a lot?
Oh, huge influence,
Yeah.
especially Gertrude Jekyll.
Yeah.
She was amazing with color. She really understood how to use plants
Okay.
to create a specific mood or feeling in the garden.
I can just imagine one of her gardens, just bursting with color, but still looking so natural.
Totally. And that's what's so cool about cottage gardens, right? You have that balance between being kind of wild and free-flowing,
Mm-hmm.
but also carefully designed. If you
Yeah.
look closely,
Yes. That's exactly what I love about them.
it's a real art.
It is. And I remember reading about how Jekyll used what she called leading lines.
Oh, right. Tell me about that.
It's like using a path or an archway to draw your eye through the garden.
So smart. You're guiding the visitor's experience, even in an informal design.
That's it. You experience it as you walk. There are surprises around each bend.
I love that. And another key part of the cottage garden look
Yeah.
is that density,
Mm.
They're packed with plants.
Oh, yeah, that abundance.
Right. Flowers, herbs, foliage, it's all crammed in together.
So lush.
Yeah. The abundance is partly why people love them, don't you think?
Totally. It feels so generous, like nature's just giving everything it's got.
That's a great way to put it. And it's also practical, believe it or not.
Yeah. In what way?
Think back to those medieval gardens we talked about.
Yeah.
Space was limited, right? They couldn't afford to waste an inch.
Right.
So cramming in plants helped prevent weeds from growing.
Oh, that makes sense.
It was like a natural weed barrier on top of looking beautiful.
Double win.
Exactly. So we've got this informal layout. We've got the dense planting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about the actual plants themselves? What do you think of when you picture a cottage garden?
Well, from what I've seen, it seems pretty flexible.
Hmm.
Like, there are definitely some classics, but there's also a lot of room for personal choice.
You're totally right. You won't see a strict plant list for a cottage garden.
So it's more about capturing the feeling, the overall spirit of the style.
Exactly. It's about choosing plants that do well in your specific spot,
Mm-hmm.
but also evoke that romantic, nostalgic feel.
Speaking of that feeling,
Yeah,
there's definitely a certain mood that comes with a cottage garden,
Yeah.
right?
absolutely. It's like stepping back in time, escaping the modern world.
Yes.
Imagine mossy stone walls, roses climbing over arches, maybe a weathered bench.
I love that. So charming.
Totally. It's like walking to a fairy tale.
And then you add those rustic details,
Oh, right. The details, those are so important.
like the picket fences, old watering cans used as planters, birdhouses tucked in the foliage.
Perfect examples. They all contribute to that storybook charm.
They really do. Okay, this is all sounding so dreamy.
I know, right?
But at some point, we do have to get practical.
You're right. Dream gardens don't just magically appear.
So where would someone even begin if they wanted to create their own cottage garden?
Right. Let's get down to business. Like any garden, it starts with the basics.
Okay.
You got to assess your site, prepare the soil.
Right, right. Even though it's a natural look, we still need to do the groundwork.
Exactly. Things like sunlight, soil type, drainage.
Yeah.
Those are all crucial. Cottage garden plants are generally pretty tough,
Okay.
but most A good fertile soil that drains well.
Makes sense.
So adding compost, almost always a good idea.
Good old compost. Still the best, huh?
Uh-huh, yep. Never underestimate the power of compost.
Now, I'm guessing pathways are important for that meandering cottage garden feel.
Oh, definitely. Those winding paths are essential. They invite you to explore,
Mhm.
to discover all the hidden nooks and surprises.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
I like that. And the material for those paths matters too, you know?
In what way?
Well, gravel, stepping stones, reclaimed wood,
Hmm.
all those add to that rustic cottage garden vibe.
I can see that. And of course, we need a place to sit and enjoy it all.
Oh, absolutely. A comfy bench, a little seating area, that's a must.
Yeah.
And you can even create rooms within the garden.
Oh, like how?
Use fences, hedges, or even strategically placed shrubs.
I like that. Little pockets of interest throughout the garden.
Yeah, makes it feel bigger too. And what about structures? Do you like arbors, pergolas?
Oh, I love those. Especially with climbing plants, maybe even a little water feature tucked away somewhere.
You're speaking my language. Arbors are perfect for plants like clematis, wisteria.
Oh, yeah. And those gorgeous climbing roses.
Absolutely. They add height and visual interest,
Mm-hmm.
and they support those climbers.
I'm already picturing it. A rose-covered arbor leading to a secluded seating area with little fountain.
Sounds magical. And raised beds are popular too, for cottage gardens.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
They can define edges, control the soil a bit more, and show off plant groupings.
Oh, so many possibilities. Okay, we touched on plants earlier,
Yeah.
but let's get into the specifics. What are some absolute must-haves for a classic cottage garden?
All right, let's talk plants. Well, like we said, roses are non-negotiable,
Aha, of course.
especially those old-fashioned varieties like English roses.
Oh, yeah, and the climbers with those incredible scents.
Ooh, the fragrance.
Eh,
So intoxicating. And lavender is another classic, obviously.
makes sense. Why is lavender so iconic for cottage gardens, do you think?
Well, it's got it all,
Mm-hmm.
right? The color, the smell, it attracts pollinators. It just perfectly embodies that relaxed, romantic cottage garden vibe.
I agree. Okay, we've got roses and lavender. What about plants that add some height?
Ooh, good question. Foxgloves and hollyhocks are classic for
Yeah,
that.
those tall spires.
Exactly. And they self-seed a lot, so they keep coming back year after year.
Low maintenance and beautiful? Sold? What about some other vertical accents?
Delphiniums and lupines are great for height,
Yeah.
and they bring in those beautiful, cool tones like purples and blues.
Ooh, I like that.
And of course, we can't forget about climbers like clematis.
Oh, they're gorgeous. So versatile.
They really are. Perfect for fences, arbors, trellises.
And speaking of show-stopping blooms, what about hydrangeas?
Oh, you can't go wrong with hydrangeas in a cottage garden. They're like giant, fluffy clouds of color.
I love them. And hardy geraniums are another good one, right?
Yes, perfect for filling in gaps and adding those delicate touches.
It's like we're building this incredible tapestry with all these different colors and textures blending together.
It really is. And that's the magic of cottage gardens.
Okay, but we can't get too carried away with plant dreams.
You're right. There's the less glamorous side, too.
We gotta talk maintenance.
Uh-huh, yep. Even the most charming garden needs some TLC.
So true. So, what are the essentials for keeping a cottage garden happy?
Well, first and foremost, consistent watering is key.
Especially in those dry spells.
Exactly. And even though we want that natural look, fertilizer is still important.
What kind do you recommend?
A balanced organic fertilizer works well,
Okay.
or a good layer of compost in the spring.
Compost again. Our trusty friend.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it really is. And mulching too, of course.
Mulching is good for so many reasons.
Right. It helps with moisture, keeps the weeds down, and adds nutrients as it breaks down.
Like a little blanket for the soil.
I like that. And then there's pruning, which can be tricky for some people with the informal look.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
You still got to prune, though. It keeps plants healthy, encourages new growth.
So it's not just about shaping things.
Not at all. It's about the overall health of the plant. And deadheading, too.
Ah, deadheading. Does that really encourage more blooms?
It can, for some plants. And it prevents them from self-seeding too much.
Oh, right. Although sometimes those volunteer seedlings are nice.
True. You can let a few go if you like the surprise.
It's about finding that balance.
Yeah. Exactly. Control and let it go, all at the same time.
Okay, now with all that dense planting, I gotta ask about weeding.
I bet you do. It's not as bad as you might think.
Oh,
The
really?
density actually helps prevent weeds to a certain extent.
Oh, that's good to know.
Still need to be vigilant, though.
Okay.
Gentle hand weeding is usually the best way to go.
All right, good tip. Now, what about those seasonal transitions?
Ah, yes. How to keep the cottage garden looking good all year round.
That's the challenge.
It's all about four-season interest, you know?
Oh, right. Tell me more about that.
So you want elements that look good even in the colder months,
Makes sense.
like evergreen shrubs or plants with cool seed heads.
Oh, I like that. Thinking beyond the flowers.
Yeah. Ornamental grasses are great for this. Their
Mm.
plumes turn golden in the fall,
Yeah.
and some even have these amazing seed heads that last all winter.
Oh, wow. Like sculptures in the garden.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And don't forget about the evergreens. They provide that constant green backdrop.
Right, like boxwoods and holly.
Yeah. And then there are those plants with interesting seed heads.
Oh, yeah. Coneflowers, rudbeckia.
Those are great examples. They look amazing even after they're done blooming.
And they provide food for the birds, too, right?
Exactly. Win-win. So even in winter, the cottage garden keeps on giving.
I love that. Now, we've talked about plants, maintenance, even the off-season.
We've covered a lot of ground.
What's the next step on our cottage garden journey?
Let's talk about making it your own.
Mhm.
How do you take this style
Mhm.
and really infuse it with your personality?
That's what I'm excited about. Getting creative.
Me too. Well, one way is through those decorative accents we talked about.
Oh, yeah, like the birdhouses and the repurposed items.
Exactly. Cottage gardens are perfect for showcasing those whimsical touches.
I'm imagining that old watering can I have, turning it into a planter, maybe a rusty wheelbarrow overflowing with blooms.
I love it. It's all about that charming, eclectic look.
And those cozy seating areas are important too, right? Creating those little retreats within the garden. Oh, absolutely. Make it a place where you actually want to spend time.
A place to relax, read a book, connect with nature.
That's the dream. Now, I have confession.
Okay, tell me.
I tend to love pastels, you know?
Oh, I love pastels.
Really? Do you think that works with the cottage garden style?
Absolutely. You can use color themes to create any mood you want.
Oh, good.
Whether it's dreamy pastels, bold mixes, even a monochromatic scheme, it's all up to you.
I'm so relieved to hear that. I can already picture a little corner of my yard
Yeah.
transformed into a pastel cottage garden paradise.
That sounds amazing. Now, before we get completely lost in our daydreams,
Right, back to reality.
I'm curious about how this style is evolving. How are people adapting it for modern life?
That's a great question. It's really cool to see, actually.
Yeah.
We're seeing things like cottage meets contemporary gardens,
Oh, interesting.
blending that informal style with clean lines, or cottage meets Mediterranean for drier climates.
So the core principles stay the same.
But there's room for flexibility.
Exactly. It's about capturing that relaxed abundance, the connection to nature,
Yeah.
the joy of creating a space that feels personal.
Beautifully said. Now, as we wrap up this first part of our cottage garden deep dive, I'm wondering, what do you think it is about this style that
Yeah.
makes it so enduringly popular? Why does it still resonate with people today?
I think it taps into this longing for a simpler life, a more connected way of being. Cottage gardens offer that escape,
Yeah.
a chance to reconnect with nature, to tap into our own creativity.
It's like creating a little piece of paradise right in our own backyard.
I love that.
Now, before we get into those deeper meanings,
Okay.
let's take a closer look at the plants themselves.
Oh, yes. Let's dive into that world of vibrant blooms and fragrant foliage.
The heart and soul of any cottage garden. All right, we're back and ready to talk plants.
Yes, the stars of the show.
They really are. It's one thing to see those gorgeous pictures of cottage gardens, but how do we actually create that look, that layered, abundant feel?
That's the real challenge.
It is. It's like nature loves to fill every space, right?
Yeah. Nature abhors a vacuum, as they say.
Exactly. But in cottage gardens, it's a good thing.
Right. We want that full, lush look.
But it can't be just random, right? There's got to be some planning involved.
You're right. There's definitely an art to it. One key principle is layering,
Oh, layering, yeah.
using plants of different heights to create depth and interest.
So, like, I'm picturing those tall delphiniums or hollyhocks at the back.
Perfect examples.
Then maybe some mid-height perennials like peonies or daisies. And then those shorter flowers and ground covers spilling over the edges.
You've got it. It's like building a living tapestry, each layer adding something new.
I love that analogy. And it's not just about height, right? Bloom time matters too.
Oh, absolutely. You want something blooming all season long, ideally.
So smart. So you might start with spring bulbs,
Yeah, like tulips and daffodils.
then have perennials and annuals that bloom later on.
It's a beautiful dance of color and texture unfolding throughout the year.
And we can't forget about foliage.
Oh, the foliage is so crucial.
It adds so much texture, contrast, even movement.
And some plants have foliage that's just as beautiful as the flowers, honestly.
Oh, totally. Hostas, for example.
Stunning foliage.
Yeah.
And ferns for that woodland feel.
And I love ornamental grasses.
Oh, the grasses are fantastic. So airy and graceful.
And many have beautiful fall color, too.
It's amazing how much thought goes into picking the right plants for a cottage garden.
It is. It's a whole other level of gardening, for sure.
You're not just planting flowers, you're creating a little ecosystem.
And speaking of ecosystems, we got to talk about pollinators.
Oh, absolutely. Super important.
It's about making our gardens beautiful and beneficial.
Right. So what can we plant to attract those pollinators?
Well, lavender's a must-have, like we said.
It's a pollinator magnet.
And coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, asters, those are all good too.
Oh yeah, classic cottage garden favorites, all great for bees and butterflies.
And if you have the space, sunflowers.
Sunflowers are amazing, so cheerful, and the birds love the seeds.
It's like creating a haven for wildlife.
And had you heard about host plants?
I have, but I'm not totally sure what they are.
So certain butterflies and moths need specific plants to lay their eggs on,
Okay.
and their caterpillars eat those plants exclusively.
So it's about supporting the whole life cycle of those insects.
Exactly. And some cottage gardening plants actually are host plants.
Oh, cool. Like what?
Milkweed for monarch butterflies, for example. Dill and parsley for swallowtails.
Oh, okay.
Even hollyhocks are a host plant for painted lady butterflies.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So you can have beauty and help those important insects.
Now, another thing I love about cottage gardens
Yeah.
is that they mix in edibles so well.
Oh, totally. It goes back to those practical roots we talked about.
Herbs are a perfect example, right?
The best. Pollinators love them. They smell amazing, and we get to use them in the kitchen.
It's like having a living spice rack.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And don't forget about veggies.
Oh, so many possibilities there.
Leafy greens look beautiful. Things like lettuce and kale.
Mm.
You can train vining veggies like cucumbers and beans, trellises.
And cherry tomatoes cascading over a raised bed.
Now you're getting it. And what about root veggies?
Oh, yeah. Carrots, radishes, even beets.
They add texture with their foliage too.
So many delicious additions. And of course, we can't forget about fruit.
Oh, right. Fruit trees and shrubs are perfect for cottage gardens.
I'm picturing an espaliered apple tree or a blueberry bush overflowing with berries.
It's a feast for the eyes and the stomach.
Okay, but now we got to talk about the less glamorous side of things again.
Sustainability.
Yep. How do we approach that in our cottage gardens?
That's a crucial question. For me, it all starts with the soil.
Okay, why is healthy soil so important?
It's the foundation for everything. It provides nutrients, holds moisture,
Yeah.
and supports all those beneficial organisms that make a garden thrive.
So how do we build healthy soil?
Composting is a huge one, you know?
Yeah.
It reduces waste, and it creates this amazing nutrient-rich amendment.
Composting seems intimidating, but I really want to try it.
It's not as hard as you think. And then there's mulching, of course.
Mulching
It does so much. Weeds, moisture, and it adds organic matter to the soil over time.
Have you ever heard of cover crops?
I have. What about you?
I've heard the term, but I'm not sure what they actually are.
So cover crops are plants you grow specifically to improve the soil.
Okay.
Plant them in the fall, after you've harvested everything else, and then till them into the soil in the spring.
So they're like a living mulch over the winter.
Exactly. They prevent erosion, add nutrients as they break down.
That's so cool. Now, water conservation's a big issue for me.
Oh, I hear you. It's crucial, especially in drier climates.
Any tips for making our cottage gardens more water-wise?
Well, choosing the right plants is huge. Natives are always a good bet.
Yeah.
And there are tons of beautiful drought-tolerant plants out there.
Like succulents, lavender, even some roses can handle drought.
Yep. Once you've chosen your plants, it's all about watering efficiently.
Okay, what does that mean?
Water deeply, but less often, so the roots grow down deep.
We're training them to be tough.
Exactly.
Huh.
And soaker hoses or drip irrigation are great for minimizing evaporation.
Good tips. Okay, now we got to talk about pests and diseases.
The inevitable challenges of gardening.
It's about protecting our plants, but without using harsh chemicals.
Right. We don't want to harm the good guys.
So how do we approach pest control in a cottage garden?
Well, one of the best things is to encourage natural predators.
Like ladybugs and lacewings.
Those are perfect examples. And praying mantises, too.
Okay, so bring on the beneficial insects. How do we attract them?
Give them food, shelter, and water,
Makes sense.
Plant things they like, leave some areas a little wild, maybe add a bird bath.
It's about making the garden welcoming for them.
Exactly. You want them to feel at home. And there are other methods too, of course.
Like what?
Hand-picking pests can be surprisingly effective.
Oh, yeah.
Row covers to protect vulnerable plants. Even just spraying aphids off with a strong jet of water.
So it's about being proactive and observant.
Exactly. Catching those issues early on.
Now, are there times when we might need to use pesticides?
There might be, but thankfully, there are organic options.
Oh, good.
Things like neem oil, garlic spray, even hot pepper spray.
Wow, I didn't know that.
They can be really effective against certain pests.
So we have options. It's reassuring to know that.
And it all comes back to that philosophy of working with nature, not against it.
I love that. But what about when it gets cold? How do we keep that cottage garden spirit alive through the winter?
Ah, that's where embracing the off-season comes in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about finding beauty, even when the main growing season is over, and appreciating those elements that shine in the colder months.
So what are we looking for?
Well, first, let's appreciate foliage, even as the flowers fade.
Yeah.
Think about those amazing fall colors.
Oh, right.
Maples, dogwoods, even some of those ornamental grasses.
They really come alive in the fall.
And those grasses, their plumes turn golden. So much texture and movement.
I love it.
Some even have seed heads that last through the winter.
So the garden's still interesting, even with snow on the ground.
Exactly. And evergreens are crucial. That constant green is so important.
Like boxwoods, hollies, maybe even some dwarf conifers.
Those are all great choices. They give the garden structure.
And what about those hardscaping features we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Arbors, pergolas, fences, they all add to the winter interest.
Especially with some climbing vines or maybe some twinkling lights.
Now you're talking. And those pathways, too, they invite you to explore even when it's cold.
So true. And those little details, the birdhouses, the garden art.
All those add personality and whimsy, even in the off-season.
It's like the cottage garden charm never fades.
Exactly. It's a year-round experience. Now, I'm curious, how do you connect with nature and find joy in your own cottage garden?
That's a great question. Because for me, it's more than just the plants. It's about escaping the everyday, finding that peace and connection.
I feel that.
And the joy comes in so many forms, like the simple act of digging in the soil, planting a seed, feeling the earth. It's grounding.
It really is.
And then watching those seeds sprout, that anticipation.
It's a miracle every time.
And as they grow, tending to them, nurturing them, it feels like a partnership. And then seeing those first buds, knowing the flowers are coming.
It's the best feeling.
And then finally the blooms, that explosion of color and fragrance.
Pure joy.
And harvesting too, you know, whether it's flowers, veggies, or herbs.
It's so rewarding.
But beyond all that, it's also just about being in the garden.
Yeah.
Listening to the birds, feeling the sun, breathing the fresh air.
It nourishes the soul.
It really does. And sharing that experience with others is so important to me too.
Oh, I love that.
Inviting friends over, giving away flowers, sharing tips with other gardeners.
It's about building community.
It is. And then there's the creative side of it, which I love.
Oh, the creativity. Tell me about that.
Cottage gardens are so free, you know? There's no need for perfection. You can experiment.
You can let loose.
Exactly. Play with different plants, colors, textures, add those whimsical touches.
It becomes a reflection of you.
It does. It's a living work of art, constantly evolving.
And connecting with the history of this style, does that add to your enjoyment?
It does. It's amazing to think about those peasant gardens from centuries ago, providing food and beauty for people. We're carrying on that tradition.
It's a beautiful legacy.
It is, and it inspires me to create a garden that's meaningful and sustainable.
That's what it's all about.
It's a way of life, almost. Coexisting with nature, not trying to control it.
It's such an important lesson, especially now.
And that sense of connection extends to other people, too, you know?
Absolutely. Cottage gardens bring people together.
They do. They're so welcoming. They become gathering places.
Yeah.
I love sharing my garden with others, giving away extra produce, hosting parties.
About generosity.
And sharing knowledge, too, learning from each other, celebrating the joy of gardening together.
It reminds us that we're not alone in this.
And for me, there's also a sense of empowerment that comes with gardening.
Oh, tell me about that.
It's about connecting with the earth, nurturing life, creating something beautiful. In a world that often feels chaotic, it's grounding.
I get that.
It's a reminder that we can make a difference, even in small ways.
Beautiful. Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how can we take this cottage garden experience and extend it beyond our own backyards?
That's a great question, because it is about more than just our own gardens, isn't it?
It really is. It's a whole
Like
philosophy.
connection, creativity, sustainability.
Those are the key ingredients.
So how do we share that with the wider world? It's funny how these deep dives always go beyond the original topic.
I know, right? We start with a garden style and end up talking about life.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our cottage garden exploration, I'm wondering how we take this spirit, love of nature, the community, the creativity. How do we bring that beyond our own backyards?
That's a great question. I think, honestly, just sharing our passion is huge. Even something small, like giving a friend a plant cutting.
Oh, yeah. Or inviting a neighbor to see your garden.
Exactly. Those little things can spark something in someone else.
And they might start their own cottage garden. Who knows?
You never know. And then we can take it further, like volunteering at community gardens.
Oh, that's a good one. Or those plant swaps people do.
Yes. Or even teaching a workshop, sharing your knowledge.
It's about creating that ripple effect,
Totally. Inspiring others to connect with nature, to get creative.
And even just appreciating the beauty we see around us matters.
Oh, absolutely.
Visiting public gardens, going to flower shows, even just complimenting a neighbor's flowers.
It's about cultivating that sense of wonder.
Yeah. And speaking of community, I think it's important to advocate for more green spaces.
Oh, 100%.
Supporting parks, community gardens, even rooftop gardens in cities.
Access to nature shouldn't be a privilege. It should be for everyone.
Exactly. And we can all do our part to make that happen.
And, we can also take that cottage garden philosophy and apply it to other areas of our lives.
What do you mean?
Well, think about those principles. Connection, creativity, sustainability.
Yeah.
We can bring those into our relationships, our work, how we consume things.
So it's a mindset shift, really.
It is. It's about finding ways to connect, to express ourselves, to live more lightly on the planet.
It's about bringing that cottage garden magic everywhere.
I love that. And, as we talk about extending this experience,
Yeah.
it makes me think about the importance of slowing down.
Oh, slowing down. Yes. That's so crucial these days.
It is. We're always rushing, always on our screens.
We forget to appreciate the beauty around us.
And cottage gardens remind us to do that.
Yeah.
To pause, to listen, to feel the sun, to really be present.
To savor the moment.
Exactly. And we can do that anywhere, not just in a garden.
So true. Mindfulness while walking, while drinking coffee, even while doing dishes.
It's about bringing that awareness to everything we do.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive.
It really is.
We started with cottage gardens, and now we're talking about a whole way of life.
It's amazing how those things connect.
It is. So to all our listeners, embrace that cottage garden spirit.
Yes.
Not just in your gardens, but in every aspect of your life.
Create beauty, connect with nature, share your passion, and find joy in the simple things.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Happy gardening, everyone.